Gary Collins stared in disbelief at the Lemnorian High Council, his jaw slack as he processed the words that would change his life forever. He was to marry Princess Murloc, the infamously unattractive daughter of the Lemnorian Emperor, within 30 Earth days. The council chambers, a vast hall of shimmering crystalline structures, suddenly felt oppressive. Gary's mind raced, trying to comprehend how he'd ended up in this situation. Just moments ago, he'd been summoned here, expecting a routine diplomatic briefing. Instead, he found himself at the center of a galactic incident. The High Counselor, a towering figure with iridescent scales and multiple eye stalks, continued to explain the newly enacted law. This mandate requires all species within Lemnorian territory to participate in arranged marriages with our royalty. It is designed to promote genetic diversity and strengthen diplomatic ties. Gary's diplomatic training kicked in, allowing him to maintain a neutral expression despite the turmoil within. He noticed other alien diplomats in the chamber, their varied anatomies conveying a universal sentiment. Pity, whispers, and furtive glances in his direction confirmed the rumors he'd heard about Princess Murloc's legendary unattractiveness and difficult personality. As the High Counselor droned on about the importance of this law, Gary's mind frantically searched for a way out. He knew the stakes were immense. Refusal could have severe consequences, not just for him, but for humanity's standing in the galactic community. Earth had only recently gained a foothold in interstellar politics, and this forced union threatened to unravel years of careful diplomacy. Gary's eyes darted around the chamber, taking in the alien architecture and the stoic faces of the Lemnorian officials. He realized he needed to buy time, to find a loophole or diplomatic solution that could extricate him from this mess without offending their hosts. As if on cue, Princess Murloc entered the chamber. Gary steeled himself, determined not to visibly recoil at her appearance. The princess's body was a mass of writhing tentacles, her skin a sickly shade of green, and her multiple eyes blinked asynchronously. She slithered towards Gary, initiating what he assumed was a Lemnorian courtship ritual. The sensation of her cold, slimy appendages brushing against him sent shivers down his spine. Gary forced a smile, his mind already formulating plans. He needed to research Lemnorian culture and law to find any possible escape route. He also knew he had to alert Earth's government to this development. The implications of this forced marriage extended far beyond his personal discomfort. It could set a dangerous precedent for future human-Lemnorian relations. As the meeting concluded, Gary noticed his fellow human diplomats huddled in a corner, their faces etched with concern. News of his predicament would spread quickly, and he braced himself for the storm of interstellar politics that was about to erupt. Leaving the council chambers, Gary's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Earth's ambassador. "Stall for time. Legal team en route. Do not agree to anything." The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. He was now the linchpin in a delicate diplomatic dance, tasked with navigating the complex maze of alien customs and interstellar law. As he walked back to his quarters, Gary's mind raced with possibilities. He had 30 days to find a solution, 30 days to preserve Earth's standing in the galactic community, 30 days to avoid a marriage that defied both his personal desires and human norms. The bizarre alien law that demanded he marry the ugly alien princess had set in motion a chain of events that would test his diplomatic skills to their limits. Gary straightened his shoulders, ready to face the challenge head-on. After all, the fate of human-alien relations now rested in his hands. Gary's communicator buzzed again as he approached his quarters. It was Ambassador Stern, updating him on the legal team's progress. "We're en route, Collins. ETA 48 hours. Remember, stall at all cost." "Understood, sir," Gary replied, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. No sooner had he ended the call than a Lemnorian attendant materialized beside him, startling Gary with its sudden appearance. The alien's multiple eye stalks swiveled towards him. "Human Collins, your presence is required for the first pre-wedding ritual," the attendant announced, its voice a series of clicks and whistles, translated by Gary's earpiece. Gary suppressed a groan. "Now? I was hoping for some time to prepare." The attendant's eye stalks quivered in what Gary interpreted as amusement. The rituals wait for no one, Human Collins. The royal handlers insist we begin immediately. Realizing he had no choice, Gary nodded and followed the attendant through the winding, crystalline corridors of the Lemnorian palace. They arrived at a massive door adorned with intricate, swirling patterns. "The Chamber of Compatibility," the attendant announced, gesturing for Gary to enter. As the door slid open, Gary's nostrils were assaulted by a pungent, slightly sweet odor. The room beyond was filled with a thick, gelatinous substance that pulsated with an eerie bioluminescence. Princess Murloc was already there, her tentacles undulating in the strange gel, her multiple eyes fixed on Gary as he hesitated at the threshold. A royal handler, distinguished by its ornate carapace, approached Gary. "This is the bonding gel," it explained. "It will synchronize your biological rhythms and enhance communication between you and your betrothed. Please enter." Gary took a deep breath and stepped into the gel. The viscous substance engulfed him up to his waist, its temperature matching his body heat perfectly. He waded awkwardly towards Princess Murloc, trying not to grimace as the gel squelched around him. As he drew closer to the princess, Gary felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed by a flood of alien emotions and thoughts. Confusion gave way to astonishment as he realized he was sensing Princess Murloc's consciousness. Beneath the layers of royal decorum and haughty demeanor, Gary detected a deep well of insecurity and loneliness. Flashes of memory surfaced, years of rejection, whispered insults, pitying glances. He saw Princess Murloc as a child, hiding from the cruel taunts of her peers, her appearance considered grotesque even by Lemnorian standards. The princess's eyes widened, and Gary knew she was experiencing his thoughts and feelings as well. He felt her surprise at his initial revulsion, followed by a flicker of hurt, and then curiosity. You do not wish to marry me," Murloc's voice echoed in his mind, tinged with resignation. Gary struggled to organize his thoughts. "It's not personal, Your Highness. On Earth, we don't practice arranged marriages, and our species are so different." "Yet here you are, in the bonding gel," Murloc replied. "You could have refused, consequences be damned, but you chose diplomacy. Intriguing." As they continued to wade through the gel, Gary and Murloc exchanged more thoughts and memories. He learned of her passion for Lemnorian history and her secret desire to explore the galaxy. She, in turn, experienced his memories of Earth, its varied landscapes, cultures, and the complex dance of human relationships. Hours passed, and when they finally emerged from the Chamber of Compatibility, Gary found himself looking at Princess Murloc with new eyes. Her appearance was still alien, and by human standards, unattractive, but he now saw the intelligent, complex individual beneath the surface. As Gary was escorted back to his quarters, his mind reeled from the experience. He was so lost in thought that he almost collided with Ambassador Stern, who had just arrived with the legal team. "Collins, there you are," Stern exclaimed. "We need to talk strategy. The Lemnorians are being infuriatingly inflexible about this marriage law." Gary nodded, his expression grave. "Sir, there's something you should know. The rituals, they're more intense than we anticipated. I've learned things about Princess Murloc and Lemnorian culture that might be relevant to our negotiations." Stern raised an eyebrow. "Go on." As Gary began to explain, alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace. A Lemnorian voice echoed through the corridors. "All diplomats report to the Grand Hall immediately, by order of Emperor Zaxlor." Gary and Stern exchanged worried glances. Whatever was happening, it was clear that the next few hours would be crucial for the future of human-Lemnorian relations. As they hurried towards the Grand Hall, Gary's mind raced. He had to find a way to use what he'd learned in the compatibility ritual without betraying Murloc's trust. And somewhere in the complex web of Lemnorian law and culture, there had to be a solution that would satisfy both Earth and the Lemnorian Empire. The doors to the Grand Hall loomed before them, and Gary steeled himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. The fate of two worlds now rested on his shoulders, and he was determined to find a way through this interstellar crisis. The Grand Hall buzzed with tension as diplomats from various species gathered, their faces etched with concern. Gary and Ambassador Stern pushed through the crowd, exchanging worried glances. Before they could speculate on the reason for the sudden summons, a Lemnorian official approached them. "Human Collins," the official clicked, its eye stalks swiveling in Gary's direction. "Emperor Zaxlor requests your presence in his private chambers immediately." Gary's stomach tightened. He turned to Stern, who nodded gravely. "Go, Collins. We'll handle things. Here, remember your training." With a deep breath, Gary followed the official through winding corridors, each step echoing in the crystalline passageways. They arrived at an ornate door that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. "Enter!" A deep voice resonated from within. Gary stepped into Emperor Zaxlor's chambers, his heart pounding. The room was vast, its walls adorned with holographic displays of star systems and alien landscapes. At its center stood Emperor Zaxlor, a towering figure whose iridescent scales reflected the soft, bioluminescent light. The Emperor's multiple eyes focused on Gary, curiosity evident in their depths. "Human Collins," Zaxlor's voice rumbled. "I believe you've made a discovery regarding our prophecy." Gary's mind raced. How did the Emperor know? He swallowed hard, choosing his words carefully. "Your Imperial Majesty, I've come across information that suggests the marriage law might be based on a misinterpreted prophecy." To Gary's surprise, Emperor Zaxlor's eye stalks drooped slightly. "You are correct, Human Collins, but the truth is far more complex than you might imagine." The Emperor moved to a nearby console, activating a holographic display. It showed a graph of the Lemnorian population, steadily declining over centuries. "Our species faces extinction," Zaxlor explained, his voice heavy. "We are in the grip of a severe fertility crisis. The marriage law was enacted not just for genetic diversity or diplomatic ties, but as a desperate attempt to save our kind." Gary's eyes widened as the implications sank in. The Emperor continued, gesturing towards an image of Princess Murloc. "My daughter's appearance, which your kind finds so challenging, is a result of genetic mutations. Generations of royal inbreeding have taken their toll." A wave of empathy washed over Gary. He saw the situation in a new light, the weight of an entire species' fate settling on his shoulders. Emperor Zaxlor turned to face Gary directly. "You now face a choice, Human Collins. Will you go through with the marriage, potentially saving our species, or will you refuse, possibly condemning us to extinction?" Before Gary could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. The doors burst open as Lemnorian security forces rushed in. "Your Imperial Majesty," one of them chittered urgently, "human extremists have infiltrated the planet. They claim to be here to rescue the diplomat from forced marriage." Chaos erupted as reports flooded in. The extremists, led by a human named Jack Hawkins, were engaging Lemnorian forces across the capital. Gary's mind reeled. He had to act fast. "Emperor Zaxlor," Gary said, his voice steady despite the turmoil, "let me speak to them. I might be able to defuse the situation." The Emperor nodded, leading Gary to a balcony overlooking the central plaza. Below, human extremists clashed with Lemnorian security forces. Energy weapons flashed, and the air filled with shouts and alien screeches. Gary stepped forward, activating the plaza's public address system. His voice boomed across the battlefield, causing both sides to pause. "This is Gary Collins," he announced. "I am here of my own free will. There is no need for violence." A rugged human with a plasma rifle stepped forward. "Collins, we're here to save you from these alien oppressors." It was Jack Hawkins, the extremist leader. Gary shook his head. "You don't understand the situation, Hawkins. The Lemnorians aren't oppressors. They're a species fighting for survival." He explained the fertility crisis and the true purpose of the marriage law. As he spoke, he saw confusion and doubt spread across the faces of the human extremists. Hawkins, however, remained unconvinced. "Don't be naive, Collins. They've brainwashed you. You're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome." Before Gary could respond, Princess Murloc slithered onto the balcony. Her presence caused a stir among both humans and Lemnorians. "Please," she said, her voice amplified for all to hear, We never meant to cause harm. We only wish to survive. Gary looked at Murloc, seeing past her alien features to the intelligent, complex individual he'd come to know. He turned back to address the crowd. "I came here as a diplomat," Gary said, his voice firm. "My duty is to foster understanding between our species. The Lemnorians need our help. If this marriage can save them from extinction, I'm willing to consider it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the extremists lowered their weapons, but Hawkins stood firm. "You're betraying humanity, Collins," Hawkins shouted. "We won't let you do this." Gary realized he was at a crossroads. He had to find a way to convince the extremists to stand down, navigate the complex political situation, and decide whether to go through with the marriage. The fate of human-Lemnorian relations hung in the balance. As tension filled the air, Gary's mind raced. He knew his next words could shape the future of two species. He took a deep breath, preparing to address the crowd once more, fully aware that his decision would have far-reaching consequences for both humanity and the Lemnorians. Lemnorians. Gary's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. The plaza fell silent, the clash of weapons giving way to a tense stillness. Jack Hawkins, his face contorted with confusion and anger, lowered his plasma rifle slightly. "What do you mean, save them from extinction?" Hawkins demanded, his voice echoing across the now quiet battlefield. Gary glanced at Emperor Zaxlor, who nodded imperceptibly. Taking a deep breath, Gary addressed the crowd once more. "The Lemnorian species faces a severe fertility crisis," he explained, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Their population has been declining for centuries. This marriage law, it's not about oppression or diplomacy. It's a desperate attempt to save their entire species." Murmurs rippled through both the human and Lemnorian forces. Gary could see the doubt and confusion spreading across faces on both sides. Hawkins, however, remained skeptical. "And you expect us to believe that? How do we know this isn't some alien trick?" Before Gary could respond, Ambassador Stern stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his calm demeanor. "Mr. Hawkins, I can assure you that Diplomat Collins is speaking the truth. We've been privy to classified information regarding the Lemnorian situation." As Stern spoke, Gary's mind raced. He knew he needed to act quickly to defuse the situation and find a solution that would satisfy both sides. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "I have a proposal," Gary announced, his voice ringing out across the plaza. "I will agree to marry Princess Murloc, but on one condition: the Lemnorian Empire must agree to form a joint human-Lemnorian scientific task force to address the fertility crisis affecting both our species." Emperor Zaxlor's eye stalks quivered with surprise. "Both your species?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of curiosity. Gary nodded. "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. Humans are also facing a growing fertility crisis, albeit less severe than yours. By working together, we may find solutions that benefit both our peoples." The Emperor considered this for a moment, his scales shifting colors as he processed the information. Finally, he spoke. "Your proposal is intriguing, Human Collins. I accept." With a gesture from Emperor Zaxlor, the Lemnorian forces lowered their weapons. Gary turned to Hawkins and the human extremists. "Jack," he said, his tone conciliatory, "I understand your concerns, but this is an opportunity for genuine cooperation and mutual benefit. Will you agree to a ceasefire and join us in negotiations?" Hawkins hesitated, his grip on his weapon tightening momentarily. Then slowly he lowered the plasma rifle. "Fine," he growled. "But we'll be watching closely, Collins. Any sign of foul play, and we're out." As the tension in the plaza began to dissipate, Gary felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had managed to avert a potentially disastrous conflict, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Over the next few days, Gary found himself at the center of intense negotiations. The Grand Hall, once a place of ceremony, now buzzed with activity as human and Lemnorian diplomats, scientists, and even the former extremists gathered to hash out the details of their newfound cooperation. Gary shuttled between groups, mediating disputes and fostering understanding. He watched with pride as Ambassador Stern masterfully navigated the complex web of interspecies diplomacy, while Jack Hawkins and his team, though still wary, began to engage constructively with their Lemnorian counterparts. During a brief respite from the negotiations, Gary found himself in one of the palace's crystal gardens with Princess Murloc. The bioluminescent flora cast a soft, ethereal glow over her features, and Gary was struck by how his perception of her had changed since their first meeting. "You've surprised me, Gary Collins," Murloc said, her tentacles curling thoughtfully. "Few would have the courage to make the decision you have." Gary smiled ruefully. "To be honest, I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing, but I do know that our peoples need each other." Murloc's eyes glimmered with an emotion Gary couldn't quite identify. "Perhaps you'd like to see something," she said, gesturing for him to follow. She led him to a secluded part of the palace, a laboratory filled with advanced equipment that hummed with energy. Holographic displays flickered with complex genetic sequences and molecular models. "This is my private research facility," Murloc explained. "I've been working on potential solutions to our fertility crisis for years." Gary's eyes widened as he took in the sophisticated setup. "You're a geneticist?" Murloc's tentacles rippled in what Gary had come to recognize as the Lemnorian equivalent of a nod. "It's not common knowledge. Many in the court believe a princess should focus solely on matters of state. But I've always been fascinated by the sciences, especially genetics." As Murloc explained her research, Gary found himself captivated not just by the scientific implications, but by the passion and intelligence she displayed. He realized that their arranged marriage might offer more than just a diplomatic solution. It could be a true partnership. Their moment of connection was interrupted by an urgent message from the scientific team. Preliminary results from their joint research had revealed an exciting possibility. Combining certain aspects of human and Lemnorian biology could potentially create a breakthrough in treating both species' reproductive issues. The news spread quickly, generating a wave of excitement and hope among both humans and Lemnorians. Even Jack Hawkins, who had remained skeptical throughout the negotiations, seemed impressed by the potential of the discovery. As Gary and Murloc made their way back to the Grand Hall to share the news with the diplomats, they were unaware of the new threat looming on the horizon. In a distant part of the galaxy, the Zorgan High Command had just received word of the potential scientific breakthrough. Their cold, calculating minds immediately recognized the threat this posed to their strategic position. "Dispatch our best covert operatives," the Zorgon leader hissed. "This human-Lemnorian alliance must not be allowed to succeed." Back on the Lemnorian homeworld, Gary and Murloc stood before the assembled diplomats, scientists, and former extremists. With a shared glance of understanding, they made their announcement. "We have decided to proceed with our marriage," Gary declared, his voice firm and confident. Murloc's tentacles entwined with Gary's hand in a gesture that transcended their biological differences. "Together, we will face the challenges that lie ahead and work towards a future that ensures the survival and prosperity of both our peoples." As applause filled the Grand Hall, neither Gary nor Murloc could have imagined the convergence of forces that were about to test their commitment to each other, to their peoples, and to the fragile alliance they had forged, threatened to unravel at any moment. In the weeks following the announcement, the palace buzzed with frenetic activity. Lemnorian artisans worked tirelessly to transform the Grand Hall into a breathtaking venue worthy of such a historic union. Iridescent banners bearing the symbols of both Earth and Lemnoria draped from soaring crystal arches, while bioluminescent flora cast an otherworldly glow across the chamber. As the wedding day dawned, Gary stood before a mirror, adjusting the intricate ceremonial robes that blended human and Lemnorian designs. His reflection revealed a man changed by his experiences, more confident, yet burdened by the weight of his responsibilities. "Nervous?" Ambassador Stern asked, appearing at Gary's side. Gary managed a wry smile. "Terrified might be more accurate, but also hopeful." Stern nodded, his expression grave. "You've accomplished more than anyone could have expected, Gary. Whatever happens today, remember that." As Gary made his way to the ceremony hall, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The palace corridors seemed too quiet, the guards too tense. He pushed the thoughts aside as he entered the Grand Hall, where hundreds of human and Lemnorian dignitaries had gathered. At the far end of the hall, Princess Murloc waited. Her scales shimmered with an array of colors that took Gary's breath away. As he approached, he saw in her eyes a mixture of drive and vulnerability that mirrored his own feelings. Emperor Zaxlor began the ceremony, his resonant voice filling the chamber. Today we witness not just the union of two individuals, but of two species. May this marriage herald a new era of cooperation and... The Emperor's words were cut short as the grand doors burst open. Jack Hawkins strode in, flanked by his team of human extremists, their weapons raised. "This wedding is a sham!" Hawkins shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "The Lemnorian fertility crisis is a lie." Gasps and shouts erupted from the assembled guests. Gary's mind reeled as he tried to process Hawkins's words. Before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. "The research facility is under attack," a Lemnorian guard announced, his voice tinged with panic. In the ensuing chaos, Gary locked eyes with Murloc. Without a word, they both knew what they had to do. Gary turned to Hawkins, who stood defiantly amidst the uproar. "Jack, I don't know what you've discovered, but right now we have a bigger problem," Gary said, his voice cutting through the din. "The Zorgans are attacking our research. If they succeed, both our species lose. Are you with us?" Hawkins hesitated, his grip on his weapon tightening. Then with a curt nod, he lowered the gun. "Fine, but this isn't over, Collins." Gary, Murloc, Hawkins, and a hastily assembled team of human and Lemnorian security forces raced through the palace corridors. They burst into the research facility to find it in shambles. Zorgon saboteurs, disguised as service staff, were systematically destroying equipment and downloading data. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Energy weapons discharged, filling the air with the acrid smell of ozone. Gary and Murloc moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other as they advanced on the Zorgon positions. In the midst of the firefight, a stray energy blast struck a containment unit. The resulting explosion sent a cloud of shimmering particles billowing through the air. Gary and Murloc found themselves engulfed in the strange mist, their skin tingling as they inhaled the mutagenic substance. Despite the exposure, they pressed on. Gary's diplomatic skills proved as valuable as Murloc's scientific knowledge as they coordinated the defense of the facility. Hawkins and his team, true to their word, fought with a ferocity that surprised even the Lemnorian warriors. After what seemed like hours, the last Zorgon intruder fell. The facility was secure, but the damage was extensive. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Gary noticed Murloc swaying on her feet. "Are you all right?" he asked, steadying her with a hand. Murloc's scales rippled with an unfamiliar pattern. I'm not sure. Something feels different." Before they could discuss it further, Emperor Zaxlor entered the facility, his eye stalks quivering with a mixture of emotions Gary couldn't decipher. "Your Imperial Majesty," Gary began, "we've repelled the Zorgon attack, but I'm afraid Hawkins made some serious accusations during the wedding ceremony." The Emperor's color shifted to a deep, somber hue. "It is true," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "The fertility crisis that plagues our people. It was indeed artificially induced, but not by us." As Zaxlor explained the ancient Zorgon bioweapon and its devastating effects on Lemnorian society, Gary felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger at the deception warred with sympathy for the Lemnorians' plight. "Your Majesty," Murloc interjected, her voice strained, "I believe Gary and I require immediate medical attention. Our exposure to the mutagenic particles during the battle." Within hours, Gary and Murloc found themselves in the palace's medical bay, surrounded by a team of bewildered human and Lemnorian doctors. The scans revealed something unprecedented. The mutagenic exposure had altered their reproductive systems, potentially making them biologically compatible. As the implications of this discovery sank in, Gary and Murloc exchanged a look of shock and wonder. The possibility of conceiving a child together, a true hybrid of their species, was now a reality. Emperor Zaxlor, seeing an opportunity to salvage the diplomatic situation, quickly proposed that their union serve as a symbol of a new era of cooperation. Your marriage could be the key to our survival, he urged. But Gary and Murlock knew the decision before them was far more complex than a simple political maneuver. The weight of two species' futures pressed down upon them as they contemplated their next move. We need time, Gary finally said, his voice firm. This isn't a decision to be made lightly. As they left the medical bay, Gary and Murlock found themselves at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, the political fallout from the fertility crisis deception, the looming threat of Zorgon retaliation, and the monumental decision they now faced regarding their own future. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the next steps they took would shape the course of interstellar history. As they walked hand in tentacle down the palace corridor, both Gary and Murlock knew that whatever they decided, their lives, and the lives of countless others, would never be the same. Gary and Murlock stood in silence, their hands intertwined as they gazed out the window of their private quarters. The sprawling Lemnorian capital glittered below, a testament to the technological marvels their two species could achieve together. We can't ignore this, Gary, Murlock said, her voice soft but firm. The possibility of conceiving a child, it changes everything. Gary nodded, feeling the weight of their decision pressing down on him. You're right, but we need to consider all the implications. This isn't just about us anymore. Over the next few days, they met with Emperor Zaxlor, Ambassador Stern, and a team of scientists led by Dr. Zara Zan, a brilliant Lemnorian geneticist. After hours of intense discussions and thorough medical examinations, Gary and Murlock made their choice. We've decided to proceed with the marriage and attempt to conceive, Gary announced to the assembled group. Murlock's tentacles curled around his arm in a gesture of support. Emperor Zaxlor's eye stalks quivered with awe-inspiring excitement. This is a momentous decision. Your child could be the key to solving both our species' fertility issues. As news of their decision spread, reactions were swift and varied. On Earth, protests erupted outside government buildings and spaceports. Gary watched footage of angry crowds waving signs that read, "Keep humanity pure," and "No alien hybrids." Lemnorian society wasn't immune to the controversy either. Conservative factions within the Empire voiced their concerns about diluting their genetic lineage. Yet for every voice of opposition, there were many more who saw hope in the potential union. To mitigate the growing tension, Emperor Zaxlor proposed a solution. We've prepared a specially designed biodome on a neutral planet, he explained, displaying holographic schematics. It will accommodate both your physiological needs and provide a safe environment for your potential child. Within weeks, Gary and Murlock found themselves stepping into their new home. The biodome was a marvel of engineering, a self-contained ecosystem that seamlessly blended elements from both Earth and Lemnoria. Familiar plants from Gary's homeworld grew alongside bioluminescent Lemnorian flora, creating an otherworldly landscape. Dr. Zan and her team of human and Lemnorian scientists set up a state-of-the-art medical facility within the biodome. We'll be monitoring your progress closely, she assured them, her tentacles deftly manipulating holographic displays of their genetic profiles. As the months passed, Gary and Murlock underwent a series of treatments to enhance their chances of conception. The process was grueling, with long hours spent in the medical bay, undergoing genetic therapies and physiological adjustments. Their efforts were rewarded when, after weeks of anxious waiting, Dr. Zan confirmed that Murlock was pregnant. The news sent shockwaves through both human and Lemnorian societies. Supporters celebrated in the streets, hailing the pregnancy as a new era of cooperation between their species. However, not everyone shared in the joy. Jack Hawkins, who had been keeping a watchful eye on the situation, uncovered disturbing information. He requested an urgent meeting with Gary via secure quantum communication. "We've got a problem, Collins," Hawkins said, his face grim on the holographic display. "Our team has uncovered evidence of Zorgon spies infiltrating both human and Lemnorian governments. They're after your research data, and I bet they'd love to get their hands on your kid." Gary felt a chill run down his spine. "How sure are you about this, Jack?" "Damn sure. We intercepted encrypted communications. They got partial data from that attack on the research facility, and now they want the rest. You need to beef up security around that biodome of yours." Gary immediately relayed the information to Emperor Zaxlor and Dr. Zan. Security measures around the biodome were increased, with advanced sensor arrays and a mixed force of human and Lemnorian defenders deployed to protect the facility. As Murlock's pregnancy progressed, Dr. Zan and her team worked tirelessly to monitor the developing fetus. The genetic characteristics we're seeing are absolutely unique, she explained during one of their checkups. Your child truly represents the best of both species. However, their excitement was tempered by growing concerns. Murlock's body was struggling to cope with the hybrid fetus's rapid growth and unusual nutritional requirements. Gary watched helplessly as his wife's health deteriorated, her once vibrant scales dulling and her movements becoming labored. We need to consider our options, Dr. Zan said gravely during a private consultation. The strain on Princess Murlock's system is severe. If we continue with the pregnancy, there's a risk we could lose them both. Gary felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath him. He looked at Murlock, seeing the perseverance in her eyes despite her weakened state. What do you want to do? He asked softly. Before Murlock could answer, alarms blared throughout the biodome. Jack Hawkins's voice crackled over the communication system. Collins, we've got incoming. Zorgon Strike Force, heavily armed. They're here for Murlock and the baby. Gary's military training kicked in as he helped Murlock to her feet. We need to get you to safety, he said, supporting her weight as they moved towards the biodome's secure inner chamber. Outside, the sound of energy weapons and explosions filled the air as the human and Lemnorian defenders engaged the Zorgon attackers. Through the biodome's transparent sections, Gary could see sleek Zorgon ships firing on the facility's outer defenses. As they reached the inner chamber, Gary was faced with an impossible choice. The biodome's defenses were faltering, and a full evacuation could put Murlock and their unborn child at even greater risk. Yet staying meant potentially falling into Zorgon hands. Gary looked at Murlock, her tentacles weakly grasping his hand, and then at Dr. Zan, who was frantically working to stabilize Murlock's condition. The fate of his family, the future of human-Lemnorian relations, and the hopes of countless individuals relying on their child as a solution to the fertility crisis all rested on his next decision. With the sounds of battle growing closer, Gary steeled himself, knowing that whatever he chose would alter the course of history. Gary's mind raced as he assessed their dire situation. The biodome's defenses were crumbling under the relentless Zorgon assault, and Murlock's weakened condition left them with precious few options. He made his decision in a split second. We're evacuating, he announced, his voice firm despite the chaos around them. Dr. Zan, prepare Murlock for immediate transport. The Lemnorian scientist's eye stalks quivered with concern, but she nodded, quickly mobilizing her medical team. Gary activated the emergency evacuation protocol, his fingers flying over the control panel as alarms blared throughout the facility. Outside, the mixed human and Lemnorian defense forces rallied under Jack Hawkins's command. Energy weapons crackled and sizzled as they held the line against the advancing Zorgon troops. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and the thunderous roar of explosions. Collins, Hawkins's voice crackled over the comm system. We'll buy you as much time as we can. Get the princess out of here. Gary supported Murlock as they made their way to the evacuation shuttle, her tentacles clinging weakly to his arm. Dr. Zan and her team surrounded them, portable medical equipment beeping urgently as they monitored the hybrid fetus's vital signs. The fetus is experiencing elevated stress levels, Dr. Zan reported, her tentacles manipulating a holographic display. We need to stabilize both mother and child before launch. As the medical team worked feverishly, Gary established a secure communication link with Emperor Zaxlor. The Lemnorian leader's image flickered to life, his eye stalks twitching with worry. Your Majesty, we're under heavy attack, Gary explained quickly. We're evacuating Murlock now. We need immediate air support and a clear path off-planet. Understood, Zaxlor replied, his color shifting to a determined hue. I'm dispatching our battle fleet now. We'll clear the skies for your escape. The shuttle base shuddered as another explosion rocked the biodome. Gary's head snapped up at the sound of energy weapons discharging nearby. A squad of Zorgon infiltrators had breached the inner defenses and was advancing on their position. "Dr. Zan, get Murloc on board now," Gary ordered, drawing his sidearm. He turned to the mixed group of human and Lemnorian soldiers guarding the shuttle bay. "With me, we need to hold them off." The next few minutes were a blur of intense close-quarters combat. Gary's diplomatic experience proved invaluable as he coordinated the mixed-species team, using hand signals and quick commands to direct their efforts against the Zorgon threat. Energy bolts sizzled past his head as he dove from cover to cover, his own weapon finding its mark more often than not. Just as the shuttle's engines roared to life, Jack Hawkins's voice came over the comm once more. "Collins, we're launching a diversion to draw their main force away from you. Get that shuttle in the air now." Gary's heart sank as he realized the implications of Hawkins's plan. "Jack, wait!" But it was too late. The sounds of battle intensified outside as Hawkins led his team in a daring assault on the Zorgon's primary attack force. Gary knew the action would likely cost his friend dearly. With the Zorgon infiltrators momentarily pushed back, Gary sprinted for the shuttle ramp. As he boarded, he caught a glimpse of Hawkins and several of his team members, falling under heavy fire. "We have to go back for them," Gary shouted as the ramp began to close. The Lemnorian pilot, Kex, shook his head grimly. "Negative, sir. We launch now, or we don't launch at all." The shuttle lifted off, leaving behind the chaos of the besieged biodome. Gary's last view of the facility was obscured by smoke and weapons fire, the fate of those left behind unknown. As they broke atmosphere, the relative calm of their ascent was shattered by the massive space battle unfolding around them. Zorgon interceptors swarmed toward the shuttle, only to be met by the combined might of the human and Lemnorian fleets. Kex's piloting skills were put to the ultimate test as he wove through the debris and weapons fire, the shuttle bucking and shuddering with each near miss. In the passenger compartment, Gary held onto Murloc as Dr. Zan and her team worked frantically to stabilize her condition. Suddenly, Murloc let out a pained gasp, her tentacles constricting around Gary's arm. Dr. Zan's instruments began beeping urgently. "She's going into labor," Dr. Zan announced, her voice tight with stress. "The evacuation and G-forces have triggered premature delivery." Gary's eyes widened in shock. "Can't you stop it?" Dr. Zan shook her head, her tentacles moving in a blur as she prepared for the emergency delivery. "The process has already begun. We need to focus on keeping them both alive through this." As if the situation couldn't get any worse, warning lights began flashing throughout the shuttle. Kex's voice came over the intercom, strained and urgent. "We've sustained damage to our life support systems. I'm attempting to reroute power, but we're losing stability fast." Gary found himself torn between assisting Dr. Zan with Murloc's delivery and helping Kex with the shuttle systems. He darted between the two, relaying information and lending a hand wherever he could. Just as it seemed they might make it to the designated safe zone, a new threat emerged. A Zorgon ship, having broken through the Allied fleet's defenses, locked onto their shuttle with a tractor beam. "They're pulling us in!" Kex shouted, fighting the controls. Gary's mind raced, searching for a solution. They were out of options, out of time, and Murloc's labor was progressing rapidly. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a massive shadow fell over their shuttle. Emperor Zaxlor's flagship had arrived, its weapons blazing. The Zorgon ship disintegrated under the barrage, freeing their shuttle from the tractor beam's grip. "This is Emperor Zaxlor," the Lemnorian leader's voice boomed over their comm system. "Prepare for emergency docking. We're bringing you in." As the shuttle was drawn into the flagship's hangar, Murloc let out a cry of pain. The hybrid child was coming, ready or not. Gary and Dr. Zan exchanged a look of commitment as they prepared to face whatever challenges this unprecedented birth might bring. With the sounds of the space battle still echoing around them, they rushed Murloc from the shuttle towards the flagship's advanced medical bay. The fate of two species and the future of galactic diplomacy now rested in the tiny, as-yet unseen hands of their hybrid child. The moment Gary set foot on Emperor Zaxlor's flagship, alarms blared throughout the vessel. The Zorgon forces, though battered, launched a final, desperate assault on the Lemnorian ship. Gary supported Murloc as they rushed towards the medical bay, Dr. Zan and her team surrounding them. The ship shuddered under heavy fire, causing the lights to flicker ominously. As they burst through the doors of the advanced medical facility, another violent tremor nearly knocked them off their feet. "We need to stabilize her now," Dr. Zan commanded, her tentacles flying over holographic displays. The premature labor, combined with the princess's unique physiology, presents significant challenges. Gary found himself torn between staying with Murloc and joining the ship's defense. He locked eyes with his wife, seeing the pain and tenacity etched on her features. Without a word, he knew his place was by her side. "I'm here, Murloc," he said, grasping her hand. "We'll get through this together." Outside the medical bay, Emperor Zaxlor's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "All hands to battle stations. Coordinate with our human allies. We must repel this attack at all costs." The next hours passed in a blur of intensity. The medical team worked tirelessly, their efforts punctuated by the sounds of battle outside. Power fluctuations threatened their progress, forcing Dr. Zan to adapt on the fly. "We're losing life support in Section 3, a Lemnorian technician called out. "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Dr. Zan ordered, her eye stalks focused on Murloc's vital signs. Gary did what he could to assist, fetching supplies and offering words of encouragement to Murloc. He marveled at her strength, watching as she fought through the pain with unwavering determination. Suddenly, Murloc let out a primal scream that seemed to momentarily drown out the chaos of battle. The medical bay fell silent as a new sound filled the air, the powerful cry of a newborn. Dr. Zan carefully lifted the infant, its tiny form a perfect blend of human and Lemnorian features. "It's a healthy hybrid," she announced, her voice tinged with awe. Gary's heart swelled with love and pride as he gazed upon his child. The moment of joy was short-lived, however, as a massive explosion rocked the ship. Warning klaxons blared as the computer announced a hull breach near the medical bay. Acting on pure instinct, Gary grabbed a nearby emergency survival suit. With practiced efficiency, he placed the infant inside and sealed it securely. The atmospheric containment fields activated, but the medical bay was already losing pressure. Gary locked eyes with Dr. Zan, making a split-second decision. "Take the child," he ordered, handing her the sealed suit. "Get to the escape pods. We'll follow with Murloc." As Dr. Zan rushed out with the precious cargo, Gary turned his attention to his weakened wife. Working with the remaining medical staff, they carefully transferred Murloc onto a mobile life support unit. They navigated the damaged corridors, the ship groaning and shuddering around them. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of Zorgon infiltrators. Gary's hand went to his weapon, but before he could act, Murloc rose from the life support unit. Her eyes blazed with newfound strength as she placed herself between the Zorgons and the medical team. Gary quickly moved to her side, and together they faced the threat. The ensuing battle was unlike anything Gary had experienced. Murloc's tentacles lashed out with incredible speed and precision, while Gary's human agility and combat training complemented her abilities perfectly. They moved as one, a seamless blend of human and Lemnorian prowess. As the last Zorgon fell, Gary couldn't help but marvel at their newfound synergy. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he quipped, earning a weary but amused look from Murloc. They pressed on, fighting their way through waves of Zorgon soldiers. The closer they got to the bridge, the more intense the resistance became. Gary's diplomatic experience proved invaluable as he coordinated with the Lemnorian crew members they encountered along the way. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors hissed open to reveal a scene of chaos. Emperor Zaxlor stood at the center, locked in fierce combat with the Zorgon commander. The two leaders traded blows, their weapons clashing in a deadly dance. Gary assessed the situation quickly. Drawing upon his years of diplomatic training and his recent combat experience, he formulated a plan. With a subtle gesture to Murloc, he circled around the fighting pair. The Zorgon commander, focused entirely on Emperor Zaxlor, failed to notice Gary's approach. In one fluid motion, Gary disarmed the alien leader, sending his weapon clattering across the bridge. Murloc seized the opportunity, her tentacles wrapping around the stunned Zorgon commander. Emperor Zaxlor, his eye stalks quivering with a mixture of surprise and gratitude, quickly moved to subdue their captured foe. With their leader captured, the remaining Zorgan ships began to retreat. The combined human and Lemnorian fleets pressed their advantage, ensuring the enemy's withdrawal. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Gary's thoughts turned to their child. He and Murloc rushed to the hangar bay, arriving just as Dr. Zan's escape pod docked with the flagship. The Lemnorian scientist emerged, cradling the sealed survival suit. "Your child is safe," she announced, her tentacles gently caressing the suit's surface. "And quite resilient, I might add." Gary carefully opened the suit, revealing their sleeping infant. He cradled the child, marveling at the perfect blend of human and Lemnorian features. Murloc's tentacles intertwined with his fingers as they gazed at their newborn, a living symbol of unity between their species. As the flagship limped back to Lemnorian space, Gary couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a bizarre alien marriage law had transformed into something far greater, a new chapter in interstellar relations, and the dawn of a united future for humans and Lemnorians alike. The medical bay doors slid open, interrupting Gary's thoughts. Emperor Zaxlor entered, his eye stalks focused on the hybrid infant. "We have much to discuss," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "The future of our peoples awaits."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.